This time we're looking at 5 French motorcycle manufacturers. Now there are lots of things you do associate with France, some of which involve engineering of course. There's the Eiffel Tower, some amazing bridges and some very quirky motor cars. But we don't tend to think about motorcycles, but the fact is the French did once have a thriving motorcycle industry, which in keeping with the rest of Europe, that's Britain included by the way, had their industry pretty much killed off by cheap cars poaching into their market. Nevertheless, here are 5 French motorcycle manufacturers from across the ages. Peugeot. These days we tend to associate Peugeot essentially with cars, but also with mopeds and scooters. But nevertheless, along with Royal Enfield, they are the oldest motorcycle manufacturers currently in production. Unlike so many British manufacturers, they too started with bicycles. And in fact were still producing bicycles way into the 1980s. But the company itself is much older than that, starting as a steel foundry all the way back in 1810. In the 1880s they took up bicycle production, but produced a first prototype motorcycle as early as 1898. And while this machine was powered by the Deon Bouton engine, then a popular choice, Peugeot would soon start to manufacture their own complete motorcycles, beginning as early as 1900. And for those who don't like to see the company included as a motorcycle manufacturer, it should be remembered that Rem Fowler's Norton, which won the 1907 multi-cylinder TT, was powered by a Peugeot V-twin engine, and the Peugeot 500M featured dual overhead camshafts in 1914. And Peugeot was one of the largest manufacturers of motorcycles in Europe and would remain the largest French motorcycle manufacturer way until the 1950s. After World War II, while still producing some conventional motorcycles, the company, following the Italian lead, would enter into the scooter market. And from that point, scooters and mopeds would form the backbone of Peugeot's two-wheeler output. Although contrary to popular belief, the ranges often included conventional geared motorcycles too. And scooters have proved to be a lucrative market for Peugeot. In the 1990s, their Speed Fight was the most popular scooter in the UK, for example, and was a major sales success across Europe. And much of the success of this era was based around a single-cylinder, fan-cooled two-stroke engine. Although this power unit is actually a licence-built version of one used on the Honda Lead. And whilst perhaps not as high-performing as some of their rivals, the engine is very effective and very reliable, making them for many commuters in Paris the go-to choice. Motobecane. Although the company's name is often abbreviated to MBK, Motobecane was once one of France's most successful motorcycle manufacturers, producing conventional motorcycles, scooters, mopeds and bicycles of course. The company produced its first motorcycle in 1923, a 175cc two-stroke lightweight machine. By the 1930s, they were the best-selling motorcycles in France. In the mid-30s they produced perhaps their most ambitious and most glamorous motorcycles, with longitudinally mounted 4-cylinder engines of 500 and 750cc's, with shaft drive incidentally. The period after the Second World War in France was an era of great austerity, so such extravagant machines were no longer required. The company instead concentrated on small two-stroke commuter machines like the D45, but this would later be replaced by the Z46, essentially the same basic machine but fitted now with all-round suspension. Like their competitors, Motobecane began to struggle in the face of cars such as the 2CV. In the 1950s and into the early 60s, sales would begin to fall. In the 1970s, to broaden the range, they introduced a range of parallel twin two-stroke 125s, and then followed Kawasaki by introducing a 3-cylinder two-stroke of 350 and 500cc's. But unfortunately these machines simply didn't sell, and the now near bankrupt company was purchased by Yamaha. The Verdel. In the years leading up to World War I, Louis Verdel was a dealer of motorcycles, automobiles and bicycles. In 1912 he founded Société des Moteurs Laune. Apologies to any French speakers out there. But the main business of the company was the manufacture of aviation engines. And incidentally in 1915 the company would merge to form the Gnome Airone aviation engine supplier. And while the business had originally been interested in bicycles and motorcycles, this is something of a cheat because the frame and cycle parts were actually put together some years later. So why have I included it, you ask? Well, simply because the thing is so damn cool, isn't it? And it sounds stunning. The engine is an air-cooled, overhead valve, 5-cylinder radial unit of 750 cc's. It's single speed, and there is a transmission brake to help stop the thing. Magne and Deon. Magne and Deon is founded in Grenoble, was founded by Joseph Magne and Louis Deon in 1893, and by 1902 had produced his first motorcycle, and by the 1920s was producing some of the most elegant motorcycles on the road, with a broad range of motorcycles featuring a number of power units, including overhead valve Blackburn units from Great Britain on some machines. However, in 1923 the company was purchased by the much larger Dijon-based Terrot concern, with Magne and Deon very much becoming the junior partners, producing a range of machines closely based on Terrot and featuring of course Terrot's engines, which would include everything from a 175 two-stroke all the way up to a V-twin of 750 cc's. After the war, things would continue as they did before, with the company essentially producing last year's Terrot at a knockdown price. However, by the mid-50s, with motorcycle sales in sharp decline, the Terrot empire was purchased by Peugeot, who in 1962 would end production of both Terrot and Magne and Deon. Terrot. In 1862, in Cannstatt, Germany, one Charles Terrot and Wilhelm Stucklen opened a factory to produce machinery, and in 1887 Terrot added a second factory in Dijon in France, a town perhaps best known for its mustard. As 1890 this factory would begin production of bicycles, and in 1902 the company would produce its first motorcycle, powered by a Swiss Zadel engine. But this range would expand rapidly, and by the 1920s they had a range of machines from 175 to 498 cc's, and featuring engines from a variety of suppliers, including the Swiss Magne and Deon and English Chatelet and J.A. Prestwick. But by 1926, Terrot was producing its own power units, and by 1929 the company produces 100,000 per machine. In 1952, in the wake of the Great Depression, Terrot would introduce a motorised bicycle, essentially an early version of a moped. The same year the company would also go road racing and win the French 250, 350 and 500 championships. And when the Second World War broke out, the company would produce a range of machines for the French army, including a mighty 750 V-twin intended for sidecar use. Post-war the company would introduce a range of 4-stroke singles using side and overhead valves, with capacities ranging from 125 all the way up to a 500cc model. There would also be a single-cylinder 125 two-stroke. And in 1951 the company would produce its first scooter. And as the 50s progressed, the company would find itself increasingly focused on the production of scooters and mopeds, with their motorcycle range increasingly becoming less popular. In 1958, main rivals Peugeot would purchase Terrot, who in 1961 would cease manufacture of motorcycles at the Dijon factory, although the Terrot factory itself would continue and does survive through to today. And while the motorcycles have long since departed, the old factory still bears the Terrot name. Whatever bikes or collections of bikes would you like to see us cover in a future video? Maybe you've got a bike you'd like to see us feature in a test ride. Either way, get in touch below. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course thank you very much for watching.